welcome to Inkpulp Audio. We are inking again today, and today we're tackling Walter Simonson. And I've got Troy Nixey with me. Hi, Troy.
Hey.
And I've got Jim Mahfood back again.
What's up,
Jim?
How are you?
Wonderful. So let's show the pieces we're going to do. So, Troy, talk and show your piece and talk about your approach.
Yeah, so we're actually doing the same piece. This is a nice LRIC piece. So I'm inking on a light pad. So I actually have two copies of this that I printed off so I can look at one in case I'm missing any details to the paper. But I have in front of me a Zebra fine line. I do most of my work with this Pentel brush pen, which I love. Spotting the blacks, maybe some line work. We were talking earlier, Sean, about how some of this really should be done with a brush, more like a brush. And then always the trusty Micron 01 and a 05.
Awesome. Jim, what about you?
Yeah, I'm doing exactly what Troy is doing. I got the light box. I have two printouts of each image. This one is Batman, badass kind of pose with some gargoyles. And then if I have time, I also have this Hawk Woman and Hawkman joint going on.
Cool.
And then, you know, my usuals, my go-tos are Pilot Parallel, pen, got a Micron 5 here, Japanese Sumi brush pen. And then off camera, I have a whole pile of shit next to my light pad in case I need other things.
Jim, do me one favor and switch your mic over to your webcam.
Oh, right.
I want to make sure that that's working. So I'm going to just show you all. I'll switch my cam real quick. I'm doing the same Elric piece as Troy. And let me switch my mic real quick and head over to my table. And I'll be inking, of course, with my trusty old Raphael 8404 number 2. And that's about it.
Nice.
So, Jim, talk, Jim, so I can hear your audio.
Yeah, how is that sounding?
Oh, that's beautiful. Sexy voice.
Nice, yeah. It sounds like you're in an auditorium. It sounds great.
Oh, wow. Okay. The camera's like right next to my face. So
okay.
if I
All right. So, what about your approach, Troy? When you look at this, how do you think you're going to tackle this?
Well, let me turn my light pad on, and I don't have the fancy system where you guys can just hit a switch. I'm going to do a nice little cameraman move down here to my light pad. I don't know how well is that showing up all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
So I'm just going to start. What I usually do when I really don't know how to tackle something is sort of pick the most innocuous spot and sort of start there and figure it out as it goes. So I'm probably going to start in the hip area and just see how my line works on Walt's. And what I was saying earlier to Sean was I'm going to approach this a little differently in that because this is just for fun, I'm going to put more of me into it than if I had been hired to do this as a job, you know, to ink Walt. So hopefully it's kind of a cool collaboration. And hopefully if Walt sees this, he's not at all offended.
Right. Interesting.
I think that is the hope.
Yes.
I like that you said that because that thought is in my mind too, is like, if this was an actual job, would I approach it differently than me doing it right now just for fun?
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like us doing it right now just for fun, I feel way less precious about it.
Oh, for sure.
And the whole point is to have fun. So
yes.
Right. I mean, I would probably emotionally feel different, but I wouldn't approach it any different. Like, I'd certainly have my anxiety with it if it was a job, but I wouldn't approach it any differently. I'm going to be the first to say I'm going to make an absolute mess of this.
Well, with that attitude.
I have no idea how to tackle this.
Well, what's interesting is you're going in with a brush, which is probably the correct approach. So it'll be interesting to see just how everybody's fleshes out in the end. I guess just the best thing to do is just to sort of dive right in and see how it goes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my goal is to just, hopefully with each one of these, we learn something about our own thinking or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of a fun exercise because I think that as artists, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but we certainly get into our habits and our patterns, and we draw to ink, at least I do. And so tackling something that wasn't drawn by me is it'll be interesting to see the takeaway that I get from it.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And I mean, like, Jim, we've inked Mignola. So for me, I mean, like I was explaining to Troy earlier, like Mignola's science is similar to mine because he's been such an influence on the way I not just ink, but draw and see. I mean, I see things in wedges and shapes of shadow and light similar to him. So it was like I understood the structure of the drawing he would have done. Maybe some of the marks I didn't understand initially. Sure. In terms of like what they meant to me. But Walt is a whole different animal right now.
Well, and what's interesting about Mike's recent stuff, the awesome images he's been posting on Instagram, is that he's been drawing with pencil crayon. So his values are essentially textured lines. He's not just thinking of them in terms of, oh, this would just be black. He's sort of very purposefully going in and choosing direction of lines and stuff. So that's been kind of really interesting to see.
Yeah. So do you know the actual tool he's using? Like what is he using?
I think he's just using Prisma Black pencil crayons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. It's awesome.
Because when we did a swap years back, he asked if I wanted in black pencil crayon or if he wanted it in pencil. So.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Oh wow. Well, I also am noticing that the more and more drawings he does, you're seeing more and more play with the texture he's creating and the values he's using.
Oh yeah.
Like the latest batch with the like 70s TV commercial icons. Those are awesome.
Well, and he's clearly having fun. Like he's obviously having so much fun with those.
It was funny because the other day we were doing another Mignola video, and Troy, I was telling the guys, I'm like, okay, he's starting to do these serial characters. Like this is so obvious. This is so obvious to say this, but where's Count Chocula? You know, like where's Booberry? Like he has to be coming at some point, right? Come on.
Well, and it was funny. The one that he posted last night kind of threw me for a curveball. Because I was a cartoon kid growing up, so I watched so many Saturday morning cartoons in the 70s and 80s. And he posted that Melvin the Monster, I think is what it was called. And I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of it before.
Either. It was Milton the Monster. Milton, right?
Oh, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, so I Googled it, and as you do. And I had never seen that cartoon before, ever, which is shocking for someone like me.
Yeah, it looked like something I would have loved as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, his HR Puffin stuff got me. Like, I was like, fuck, I wish I would have had that when we were inking.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, because that was my jam. Those Croft Brothers things.
Yeah, the Sid and Marty Croft.
Yeah, I have much love for that shit.
How much acid did those guys do?
Oh my God.
It's like talking mushrooms and stuff in the show.
Oh, yeah. Have you guys ever inked any Kirby?
we're gonna do that one too. We haven't done that yet.
That's the one I'm probably most excited about. Like that.
I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
I think that's one where I would crack out the brush.
Yeah, you kind of have to.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Kirby inker, Troy?
That's a tough one. I tend to, when I look at Kirby's work online, because sometimes I'll just do it just to, you know, sort of get jazzed about the energy that he puts in his work. I tend to just look at his pencils.
Yep.
And just see what he did with that. He worked with some really good inkers, and then he worked with some really bad inkers. But what about you? Who's your favorite?
I mean, I'm a Mike Royer guy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the Fourth World stuff, especially, and the 2001 stuff. I just love that look of like, okay, this is really clean, super loyal inking, almost in a tracing fashion, so that we really see everything that Jack put down. And yeah, man, there's just something there. There's something so clean about it, and true to the Kirby energy that that's kind of my favorite stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Sean?
I honestly, I have to plead a little bit of ignorance here. I'm a fan of Kirby, but I'm not steeped in the knowledge of who inked him on what. I haven't gone down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
Yeah. It's easy. I mean, God, he just created so much. That rabbit hole is very deep.
Yeah. It's cool because like I have a bunch of the Kirby collector magazines.
Oh yeah.
And those guys are really good about posting like so many penciled pieces of his, just, you know, his art just pure in dynamic, powerful pencil forms, you know. Sometimes that's sort of all you need, really.
Now, here's a question for you guys. Did you get into Kirby? I know we're inking well, but did you get into Kirby early or later?
I got into him later. It's funny. When I was in high school, like when I was growing up in St. Louis, I had one buddy who collected comics with me, and he was obsessed with the New Gods and was buying the back issues from the 70s. And he was trying to turn me on to the book, but also to Kirby. And at the time in the 80s, I was so obsessed with like Frank Miller and like the original Ninja Turtles comics and stuff that was raw and scratchy and detailed, that when I was first exposed to Kirby's work, I didn't understand it at all. It looked like a coloring book art to me.
Ah, okay.
I didn't understand like the thick, chunky lines. I didn't understand the dynamic language that he was delivering. I didn't realize what contribution he had made to the history of comics at that point. So for me, it looked childish and almost amateurish compared to, you know, like I said, like Frank Miller, John Romita Jr., those 80s guys that I was really obsessed with.
Yeah. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably on the same school as Jim in that, but I do remember, like, from the first time I saw it, there was a charm to it that I enjoyed. I don't remember exactly what or when that was, but I think it was when like Batman the Animated Series came out and I started to learn about Bruce Timm and went on a deep dive on his work, and then saw the Kirby influence where it started to make sense. I remember one time I was doing an ink study from a Rick Leonardi drawing, and like I just was like, I had the comic book on my art table, and I was trying to replicate what I saw. And then when I was done, I was like, I took a step back and I was like, oh my God, I'm starting to understand Kirby, and I saw like his influence on someone like Rick Leonardi from doing that.
Right.
So I don't remember it. It's not like I had a one aha moment. I do
Mm-hmm.
think I always enjoyed looking at it because there was a charm to the drawing. But I don't remember like it wasn't like instantly where I was like, oh my God, this guy is fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I'm the same too. I honestly, it took me a little while to learn to appreciate him, and um, I when I found comics as Marvel and DC, because I come into comics a little weird. My first comics were Mad Magazine and Tintin. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, so finding Marvel and DC later on, Byrne was huge at the time. And so I very sort of quickly became a Byrne fan. But as you mature and grow and as an artist, and when I decided that comics is what I wanted to pursue, and you start looking at everything, and I just realized how much Kirby had influenced everyone that I liked.
Oh yeah.
Right,
And then
right.
you really start to learn and appreciate, for me anyways, it was just what he was all about. And the energy and the power in his work
Yeah.
is no one even comes close to him, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And also the design, like as a designer, like a character designer, I love what he did.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, man. And like the exact like same vibe as what you guys are saying. What really made things click for me is when Cosmic Odyssey from DC came out.
I was just gonna say
Right.
that.
And my same friend who's obsessed with New Gods and Kirby, he showed me that, and I already dug Mike Mignola's work, but he was like, "This is the gateway. This is Mignola doing Kirby basically, and doing
Mm-hmm.
characters and his world, and this is all stuff that Jack created and designed." And that was kind of like that was the missing puzzle piece for me. Where
yeah, that
just
was
like
big for me too.
said, it was kind of like, oh, this guy isn't just like one of the linchpin artists of comics. He created half the shit that I've been looking at my whole life.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm starting to understand all this a little bit better.
That looks amazing, man.
What's that?
That looks amazing.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, badass, dude.
Doing my kind of Sienkiewicz thing on this.
How are you guys doing so far?
I'm having fun.
Yeah, this is going a lot better than I planned. I'm finding that I'm just trying to capture his loose quality and do what I do.
Yes.
It's like I can see the marks he would have made, and like I'm making them, they look different, but I'm not hating it as much as I thought.
Well, knowing how Walt sort of goes in with his blacks, and he creates a lot of movement within his blacks with lines, not necessarily filling in everything solid black.
Right.
I realized I'm not capable of that. So where he would do that, I'm likely just going to spot blacks and hopefully not upset the balance of of what Walt does.
Right.
I'm kind of like leaning into it and letting the dry brush happen in those areas. So
Oh,
I'm getting
nice.
broken lines. In some areas, I am choosing to make it a solid black. Just as I go, like I'm noticing, like I don't want it to be too light and airy and not hold together. So I'm trying to use those blacks to ground a few things.
Nice.
But it's certainly an interesting exercise.
Definitely.
Do either of you know Walt?
I have I've met Walt. I've been to his house. I don't know if he'd remember me at this point, but yeah, I knew him for a little while there.
Nice. I've never met him. I'm not a big show guy.
Right.
I don't go to shows, so Most of my relationships I did back in the 90s. That's, where Jim and I used to hang out at Comic Con back in the 90s, but I haven't gone really to any kind of big shows in years, if not decades. So there's all these great artists who I would love to meet and just never had the opportunity. And Walt is certainly one of them.
Well, I know, I mean, just from meeting him, I have a great story to back up how super nice of a guy he is. But I wanted to ask you first, did you guys meet from your, like, working at Oni at the same time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were part of the original Oni Bob Schreck posse, like first year, 1997, 98, that kind of school. And I had seen Troy's work before that I met him, but I just didn't connect the dots that he was like the Bill the Clown guy.
Okay.
Do you know that book, Sean?
No.
Oh shit. Okay.
Well, tell me about Bill the Clown.
So I came into comics in a funny way too, just in terms of what I first read, but then how I got into comics. So I was terrible. I was not a strong artist, but I was very enthusiastic. And so my first work was for a company called Monster Comics, which was a subsidiary of Fantagraphics when they were sort of doing Eros and that kind of thing. And they were just sort of branching out and trying different things. And I wrote and drew this miniseries called Prey, this 3-issue miniseries. And I was a much stronger painter, airbrush, at the time than I was a sequential artist. And so I was just doing these paintings. And one of the paintings I did ended up being the cover for Bill the Clown #1. It was just this clown, an evil smile, and holding a big giant gun with a happy face behind him full of bullet holes. And that was back in the day when you had to put together packages and pop them in the mail, and hopefully you'd hear back from a publisher. And so Dan Votto did get back to me, and he was intrigued by this Bill Clown, this Bill character that I had created, Bill the Clown. And so we ended up doing, basically 3 books worth of content, and he wrote it, and I drew it, and it was. Do you remember that movie Shakes the Clown?
Yes.
That came after. It was basically, there was no chance of a Bill the Clown movie ever being made after he did Shakes the Clown.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was just this sort of ne'er-do-well misanthrope kind of character, and just blowing up stuff and feeling sorry for himself.
Right. So I had a couple of the slave labor Bill the Clown issues, and when I met Troy, I mean, his style had changed so much from the Bill the Clown stuff to what he was doing in like '97 with the super rich squiggly ink line, kind of Al Columbia influence. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was just so different that I didn't even connect the dots and realize it was like the same guy,
There was a big learning curve for me at that time, and because that Prey came out in '91, so I was 19 years old when I did that book, right? Wow. First, like 1 year out of high school, and and I was just sort of finding my voice in the kind of stuff that I wanted to draw. And by the time I met Jim, that's when we were probably getting close to doing Jenny Finn, I think.
Yes. You had started doing like Trout stuff at Dark Horse. Was it in Dark Horse Presents?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were working, I think, with Jamie Rich.
Yeah.
And in '97, I went to San Diego Comic-Con, and I had samples of the Generation X Underground book I was doing for Marvel. And I went to Dark Horse and showed Jamie those. And he said, okay, I need your information. We need to work together. And he said, you also need to go over and talk to Bob Schreck. He just formed a new company called Oni, and you have to show him your stuff. And so I went over and, you know, met Schreck and Joe Nosmak, the guys that started Oni. And then I don't know, Troy, if I met you in 97 at the Oni party that year, or if it was 98 the next year when we were all actually signing together at the Oni booth.
I think it was 98. I think you had sort of, because I knew Bob just before he left Dark Horse. So he brought me in to do the Trout stuff in Dark Horse Presents. And was it halfway through when Jamie sort of took over? I can't remember. It was a million years ago. But
yeah.
So I think that was the transition. And when I came to Oni, because Bob assured me, he's like, don't worry, I'll reach out to you when the time is right. And I think they had announced Clerks at that time. So yeah, because they announced it a year later at San Diego, didn't they, Jim? Or
well, yeah. So
98.
In 97, they had announced that they were doing the book at San Diego Comic-Con, and their booth in 97 was just a poster of the Clerks cover done by Gilbert Hernandez.
That's right.
And a poster of Frank Miller and Simon Bisley's Bad Boy comic.
Yeah.
We did meet in 97 then, because I remember that.
Okay. So they had no books out, dude. They had nothing. They had business cards, stickers with Jay and Silent Bob on them that Matt Wagner drew, and the Clerks cover and the Bad Boy cover. And that was their booth. That was it. And then they also had a killer party that year in Shrek's hotel suite that he invited me to, and I walked in and it was like, oh, there's Frank Miller talking to the Allreds, there's Will Eisner, Matt Wagner's out on the patio smoking a joint. You know, it was like the elite of comics was there, and Bill Sienkiewicz was there. It's like, oh, my mind like exploded out of my head. And Troy, I didn't know if maybe like you and I met that night at the party.
We didn't, because I remember us hanging out. This is all coming back to me now, because I didn't get invited to the party, and I remember us hanging out. And you're like, yeah, I gotta go to this thing.
No shit.
Yeah, I totally remember this now. And so, and I was like, because I can't remember who we were all with at the time, but yeah, like you went and obviously had an amazing time. And so I just would have ended up, you know, going somewhere else to a bar or something out with other people. But I remember you're like, yeah, I got to go to this thing. And I totally remember that now.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, now I feel sorry. Like,
no, dude. Because I'm sure if I had rocked up, they would have been like, yeah, Jim, this was an invite only thing, so you have to go now too.
That's funny. The only reason Bob invited me is, and I think Bob talked about this on the interview he did with Sean on audio, but dude, I was so young and dumb. Like, I kept going to the Oni table every day and just hanging out. Just like Schreck already established on the first day, okay, we like you, we like your stuff, like we'll be in touch. We have something in mind that you might work for. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I kept going back every day just to hang in and check things out. And I would roll up and be like, Bob would be there doing his shit. And I'd be like, hey, so what's going on today? It's like, oh, just handling business, hanging out. And like, I didn't get the hint that I wanted to be on his radar so bad that I just kept going by every day and wanting to like remind him, or I kept going by thinking like maybe today is the day that he'll be like, okay, listen, we have a project. We want, and it's like, instead of playing it cool, calm and collected and just being like, cool, he's got my info, I'm on his radar, I just kept going by every day and like harassing him basically.
Well, that's what you do when you're young. You do the same thing with girls too.
Yes. Yes. I was just so excited, man, that the samples and the work that I was showing around to people were finally getting a reaction out of people, that
Hmm.
I had waited so long for that to happen that I didn't want to miss any opportunities. And I was just so excited to even be at San Diego showing my work around, that I didn't know how to be cool about it,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know. And
who
it's like,
does at that age, right?
well, yeah, it's like, dude, I was fucking, like, I was 20, I was
Yeah.
21, you know, I didn't know what was going on. And it's funny because I wanted to also tell my Simonson story, which is, and when I lived in Kansas City and was roommates with Mike Huddleston, we came up with a bunch of sample packets of him penciling and me inking. And Walt and his wife, Luis Wheezy, were at a Kansas City Comic-Con. We showed them our samples, and they took like an hour out of their day to hang out and talk to us
Oh, wow.
and critique
Yeah,
our
that's
work.
them.
And they, like Sean was saying, they're like the nicest people I've ever met, basically. And I mean, at the end of it, Walt was like, well, listen, we can't give you work. Like, we're not in the position to give you work, but he's like, you guys should be working. Like, you will be working at some point. You know, it might not be off these samples, but like your next batch of samples, or basically what I'm trying to say is you'll get in. It's just stick with it kind of thing, you know.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
But dude, we were nobodies. I mean, we were just these kids waiting in line asking for them to look at our work, and they made a point to like take us aside and actually sit down with us and stuff.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I've heard nothing but nice things about both of them. So, it's always nice to hear that story. It's not surprising because you do hear so many nice things. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's very
my
cool.
my Walt and Wheezy story is, um, so I got into comics later. I was like 15 when I first started reading comics, and one of my favorite comics at the time was Walt and Wheezy's X Factor, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there was like one of the first covers. It's what got me to pick it up. Was it was just like this cover of Cyclops, just full body, full Walt, like dynamic pose, blasting, and it was just raw and awesome and powerful, and I loved that image. So that image had a big part in pulling me into comics. So
Nice.
fast forward years later, I'm in grad school, and one of the guests is, or two of the guests are Walter and Louise. So, I'm real excited to meet them, and my buddy and I are big fans. And so we meet them, and they're so friendly, they're so nice. They spend the weekend talking to us. We go to dinners with them and everything. And that was probably in the fall. That spring, there was a school like art trip to New York City. And so we signed up and went for that. And my teacher had set up a visit to the Simonson's house
Wow.
from that. So they invited us to their house. I saw his studio, his original art collection that hangs out all over the house. Just it's incredible. It was a mind-blowing day. And they bought us pizza and took us
Oh
all out
shit.
to dinner. Yeah, they were great. And it was like amazing. And they live in Westchester, like in the woods, in this beautiful home. We saw Walter's library. We saw his studio. So it was awesome. And about a year later, no, it was I was graduating the next winter. So unbeknownst to me, my good friend who I was in school with, Pat, who knew my history with X Factor, emailed Walt, was like, hey, my buddy Sean and I are graduating. Don't know if you remember us, but I want to, for a graduation present, get him a Cyclops head sketch from you. And he told Walter the story.
Nice.
And Walter said, absolutely, send me your address. Of course I remember you guys. You guys are awesome. And so my friend Pat sent the address, but Walt never told him how much. Months went by, and Pat was starting to get nervous, didn't know what was happening, and a package arrives. And he opens it up, and it's a 14, but those big Bristol pads, 14 by 17. He opens it up, and there's a giant Cyclops head sketch. It says, "For Sean, congrats, blah, blah, blah." And he goes to pick it up to look at it closely, and another drawing falls out from behind it, and it's an Orion head sketch. And it says, "Pat, sorry for the delay."
Oh, man.
And he didn't charge Pat for any of this.
What, really?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.
It was mind blowing. But that's the kind of people we are.
That's too nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's pull back a bit, Walt. You're establishing precedent here that many of us cannot follow.
Right. Totally.
Sean, do you remember any of the original pieces he had hanging up?
Oh my God, yeah. Dude, I had to use his restroom when I was there. So he's like, "Yeah, go ahead, in the kitchen." I walked through the kitchen. I walked by an Alex Toth page hanging in the kitchen from like his war comics of like an airplane sequence.
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm losing my mind looking at that." And then I go into the bathroom. I turn on the light, and in the bathroom is Mignola's cover to the Jungle Adventure that Walter wrote. Was it Walter Weezy wrote that one that Mignola drew? That one with Apocalypse and Wolverine in the.
I think it was Louise, wasn't it? I think it was
one of them. I don't remember which one, but in the bathroom was the cover to that. And then outside Walter's studio is just this wall of art, and it's everything from Mobius to Drouillet to Bernie Wrightson, like just a ton of art, like all beautiful. But then we go into his living room where we're all kind of sitting on the floor and he's talking to us, and behind him is a giant, I mean, it must have been about 5 feet long and about 3 feet tall painting of Walt in that room sipping his morning coffee, like a beautiful painting. And so we asked about it. That's a Muth painting. And Muth did that because Muth was engaged to their daughter.
Oh.
For a time. I don't think the marriage lasted, but when he was just at the house staying there for a holiday or something and decided to paint Walt drinking his coffee.
What the hell?
Like a giant oil painting, like incredible.
Okay. Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So, like,
I also heard that Walt doesn't sell his original art, so he has like giant stacks of his pages.
I was just gonna get there. Yeah. So we're in his studio, and he opens his closet door, and there's a stack of pages taller than me from the floor up of just pages, and it's Walt's artwork.
Damn. Smart man. I mean, I've got that Thor artist edition of his, and it's like every single one of those pages is from his archives, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it must be.
If you can make enough money doing comics and you don't have to sell your originals, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because I didn't sell any of the Trout pages. I didn't make any of them available. The new series I just finished, so it's kind of hit or miss for me in terms of what I do want to put out there and what I don't. Most art collectors these days want commissions anyways because there's that sort of slight ability to give you a little bit of art direction in it and be sort of a little more involved in the process, which is cool.
Right.
So original pages, for me anyways, don't sell as well as when I sort of open myself up for doing commissions. I get a lot more traction that way. Do you guys do you tackle commissions as well, or?
I do. I mean, Troy, I kind of have this exact same thing that you're talking about where, I think we all do get this where we get, you get the collectors that are like, oh, I only collect Batman or this or that. I want one of your pieces, I need a Batman from you. I need a such and such piece from you. So I get a lot of that. I did a bunch of variant covers for various Valiant titles a couple years ago, and Valiant has a very specific, like, hardcore audience, fan base for their comics. So I wound up selling most of those original covers at Comic-Cons to these, Valiant kind of hardcore collector guys, and they're not really interested in anything else.
I'm hoping
they're not
to tap into that.
Anything else in my portfolio. They're not buying my comic. They just want the shit that I did for Valiant.
Wow.
Which is fine. I mean, that's cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So well, sorry, Jim.
Oh, go ahead. My final thought on that was, I think, like, social media and the internet has made it to where collectors can become even more specific with how they craft their collection and how they approach commissions from people.
Yeah.
Because you can just randomly text you can randomly Twitter or DM any of your favorite artists at this point, and they might reply to you, and that's how you get that piece you've been waiting for, for a long time from such and such artist or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'm finding that with with Cam, who I work with now at Inky Knuckles, is I'm finding out a lot more about the sort of creative or the collecting community that I just did not know about at all. And there are so many collectors that just want very specific things, and it's cool because if there's something that you're really excited about, then why not have a theme, right? So
sure.
Yeah, I'm actually having a lot of fun with this.
Yeah, me too. I'm
too.
getting into it. My intimidation factor is off, like it's done. I'm just having fun now.
Yeah, mine lasted about 20 minutes, and then after that it was all good. So
yeah, I mean, it's going so much faster than I thought. There's so much life and energy in his work. Like, I don't have that in my work. My work is very, like, controlled and deliberate, but I'm kind of amazed that I'm able to ink like this.
Yeah. I'm finding too, like, just loosening up a bit has really helped find that Walt vibe that probably was missing the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, his stuff is I wouldn't have thought of it this way, but it's very open to various interpretations of inking just based on what we've all got going right now.
It really is.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you can go super tight on this guy, or you can go like loose and just. But yeah, I'm having fun, man. This is.
What I'm finding that's surprising me is these big, bold brush strokes I'm doing are actually working. Like on his contour lines, like this line or in the hair here.
Yeah, that looks good,
and
dude.
It's holding together all the, like, kind of energetic chaos of the smaller strokes.
Yeah. Where are you at with yours, Jim? Are you still working on Batman? You didn't.
Yeah, I'll show you guys.
That's
where
awesome.
I'm at right now.
That's
awesome.
dope, Jim.
So yeah,
Scott,
it's
will you
cool.
hold up yours and talk so I can see it real quick?
What's that?
Oh, Scott. Troy.
Oh.
Will you? I was thinking. Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna do my nice camera move here. That's what I got going on so far.
Oh wow, you're flying, dude.
Wait, Troy, talk again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, I see. Because you talked and the camera goes there.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
the AI follows the speaker.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? You can't hear me? What?
No, you become the main menu on my video feed that I'm watching.
I gotcha.
I can see a big version of what you're doing. Looks awesome. Yeah, this is after this one, it's like, man, how do you approach Kirby? I guess any way you want, really.
And then
Eisner would be fun too.
Oh yeah,
I would be in heaven with that.
yeah.
There's
That would be...
a sketchbook that I have that has just a bunch of his pencil stuff.
I have that too. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a sketchbook with his Eisner sketchbook thing too.
Troy, is that the one that Cartoonist Kayfabe did a show about?
They did. They have a much. They were talking about a much fancier version of the one I have. I think I have sort of a first version of that isn't anywhere near as meaty and full of, like, that one's just way bigger than the one I have.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that much of his pencil work.
Yeah, it's out there. It's and it's much like Walt Simonson's in that there's just a lot of energy and life to it, and you can tell looking at his stuff that he really knows what the hell he's doing.
Oh, sure. That's that goes without saying. It's like,
yeah,
it's funny because when we're inking Mignola, we're all making our observations about him, and it's like, well, yeah, of course this guy knows what he's doing. Of course he knows how to construct a drawing. I mean, for me, it was just, I'm like, this is just, his stuff is so sculptural, it's
right.
Yeah.
Everything's there. Everything's correct. They might look like funny, cute pencil drawings that he's posting on Instagram, but the years of experience and artistry behind what he draws, as silly as it might be, serial characters or whatever the hell, you're getting the master's touch no matter
Oh,
what.
Yeah, the dude's a fucking artist.
Well, and I might be biased, but so I think personally that Mike is one of the most important cartoonists in the last 50 years or so.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Sure.
It's just remarkable what he's done and where he's come from, and to create what he has and still continues to create. Thank goodness,
Yeah. He has such a unique voice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There was that funny post that Ed Pisker put up of it was Mike pencils based on Rob Liefeld layouts, and it was obviously way back in the day, and I can't remember what Marvel book it was, but I just remember chuckling at the absurdity of that.
Dude, it's X-Force issue 8.
Is that what it was?
And I love it because back in the 90s, it's like, okay, so all the Image guys, all those guys were all fans of Mignola, obviously, and like Michael Golden, Art Adams, they knew their shit. They knew what to reference. But the idea that Rob Liefeld picked Mignola to do a fill-in issue of X-Force, and it's a Mignola, it's a Liefeld cover. So I mean, I found this in a quarter bin like last year, but it's a terrible Liefeld cover, and then you open it and it's this gorgeous Mignola art in the interiors.
Yeah.
But it's him drawing Liefeld's characters. It's so weird and awesome.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
Dude,
I thought I'd seen everything Mignola drew.
Well, there's an issue of X-Force, Sean, that
that has your name on it.
Yeah.
I'm asleep at the wheel on that one.
Available in quarter bins in most areas. So Yeah, Troy, that was such a random, like,
Yes, so
funny
random.
line, like, this exists?
I
Whoa.
was like, what?
Yeah. It's
And not to shit on Rob. That's not why I said it, but it's just kind of random, so random and funny, because Mike is, and yeah, okay, it's old, but Mike is a master of this medium. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, the just you're right. The idea of it is funny.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, man, to look back at the Image comics where it's like McFarlane got Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman to write Spawn, to write
Right.
of Spawn of all things. I mean, those guys obviously doing it for the paycheck,
Yeah.
Right.
but just the idea of all that is funny.
Well, there's a lot of nostalgia for the '90s right now, and I am just not getting sucked into it at all. Having my book come out in '91, and knowing what I was capable of the time, and just probably being a lot of really naive too, and seeing all those books come in, and seeing all those speculators jump on board, and of course, hindsight's 2020, and it blew up in our faces. But even when it was happening, I wasn't so smart to understand the consequences, but I knew that what was happening wasn't good.
Oh, sure.
And so I can't look back on the '90s with any kind of fondness at all. I just remember comics, because at 2 I was like, well, these aren't the type of comics that I want to do or capable of doing. Is this the expectation of me? I'm totally screwed.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Jim, I'm guessing this might be the same for you, but I was wanting to get into comics, and when I got out of school, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go in, and that's when everything fell apart.
Yes.
Like the whole industry collapsed.
Yeah, like when Huddleston and I were shopping around our samples in like 93 to 1995, most people would end their critique with us by saying, there might not be a comics industry next year.
Yes, I heard the same thing.
They're like, your stuff is good, but there might not be comics, so you might want to start figuring out other stuff you want to do with your art, with your talent. And that was not an encouraging thing to hear.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard too.
It was a very, very strange time, that's for sure. And not that things are amazing right now.
No, yeah.
But it's just that'll find it. I mean, the beauty is that comics are a medium, not an industry first, right? It's a medium. Yeah. And so it's not going to disappear. I mean, comics isn't going to disappear. It'll adjust. And I hope that it adjusts in the favor for the good, and that there's a lot of people who are working hard and they don't end up getting, tossed aside. It'll just be interesting to see how it does shake out.
Yeah,
I agree.
Something that none of us have like specific answer for, but it does seem like something has to change,
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, the idea of like crowdfunding, obviously, just making stuff, selling it directly to the people that want to buy it. That's something that exists now with internet, social media. It depends on how hard you want to work and how much of a hustler you want to be outside of a guy who just sits at a table and draws.
Well, and I think that there is that expectation now where you have to be a bit of a salesman for your own work. And I found that even with my most recent books at Dark Horse, that there was still a great expectation that I take on a lot of that outreach and publicity for my stuff and letting
Right.
people know it exists, and reaching out to comic shops and that kind of thing. And that's a part-time job in and of itself. And it's something that maybe I didn't succeed at super well looking back. And so, yeah, like what are the next steps? Fewer companies are offering page rates. You know, they're just sort of offering advances, and can you make that advance work for the time that you put into a book, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know the drill, but
Yep.
yeah, it's just interesting to see where all of it will go at the end.
Yep. It's I mean, that's one thing, like, you know, when I work with Image, I mean, Image does sort of let you know, like, you're kind of in charge of the marketing of your own book here. Like, we have a marketing person, but we have a limited budget, and we're doing like, what is it, like 70 titles a month, or whatever, however much they were putting out. And it's kind of like, so if you know how to hustle, you'll sell more books. Pretty obvious thing to say, but
Right.
some creators don't want to have to take that on, you know.
Well, and I see a lot of young cartoonists now who, and I don't want to say it comes naturally to them because I don't know them, but they're just really good at the social media aspect of things, and so they come into comics and they don't need a publisher.
Right. I was just gonna get there. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been able to carve out that audience, like you said, Jim, like just sort of directly marketing to their fans, and are just really good at it, and it's working for them. And people sort of, when they ask you, well, how do I break into comics? It's so different than when I broke into comics. And now it's just, I just kind of tell people, it's like, well, if you're making comics, you're making comics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's really no breaking in. You just do what you want to do and hope that you find an audience for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like, my way of thinking has shifted dramatically, where I kind of dreaded all the like social media stuff before because I'm not very good at it. I was like, wait a minute, this is now, I see an opportunity here to just do my stuff and not even have to deal with a publisher if I can do this right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's been interesting because I had a relationship with Dark Horse for years and years, and I still have one book coming out for them, though it's been delayed because of the obvious. Distributors shutting down, publisher or printers shutting down. But before that, I had a project that we were just about to start, and it got the axe. And that left me, that would have been my income for 2020, basically. And so that left me scrambling a bit. And I had, like I said, I had started working with Cam at Inky Knuckles. And then all of a sudden, commissions started coming in.
Yeah.
And knock wood that they keep up, but so far I've been able to just work on my own project that I'm writing, and don't have any publisher or nobody's seen it really. Jim, I sent you some script pages for it, but it's just, I've been able to pay the bills with commissions and sort of approach comics in a different way because of it. So it was just sort of adapting, and it's been really good so far. I can't complain at all.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am. I mean, freelance was just kind of drying up for me, and I wasn't really enjoying it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like, I started to realize, okay, there's other ways I can make money. One is through commissions and original art sales, and I'm putting a bunch of things in motion to bring me revenue that will allow me to do my comics the way I want to do them and sell them directly to people that want to read them.
Yeah, it's working for you?
Well, I mean, that's the goal. Like,
yeah,
I'm building those revenue streams right now.
Yeah.
So that it can help me make that jump. This virus thing has put a bunch of gum in the works, but it's also it's also shown me a bunch of new areas to open up to make revenue with. So it's been a teacher as well.
It is, and it's been good in that regard too, where you can it's allowed us to sort of take a step back and adjust and I'm certainly not trying to make light of the plight of many.
Right.
But,
no, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, you just do with what you have and figure it out as you go, and it has given that opportunity anyway. So.
Yeah, man. It's I did a Kickstarter in the beginning of the year, and that wound up working out pretty well. And then I just self-published a oversized art comics magazine that sold well just through my website. I only did like 500 of them. The intention was just to have those specifically for Comic-Cons this year, but that is sort of not happening. So it's like, well, I put it on social media. If people want to buy it, they can buy it. I'll send it to them, and then I'll have it for the next round of conventions when they start up again.
And you're selling them, right, Jim?
Yeah, they're doing well. And I mean, I love the idea of like, I can just make whatever I want. There's no art directing or editorial interference from anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's all me.
Right,
it's my
right.
And I put it out, and the people that dig it buy it. People that don't, they don't. That's fine,
Right.
It's each guy kind of each artist kind of crafting their own audience and figuring out what works for that,
Well, and that's the one I kind of rag on social media because it can be really horrible. I think Twitter is the worst place on earth.
Oh, sure.
But there are some really wonderful aspects of it as well, and the outreach, like you just sort of suggested, Jim, is a really great result and consequence of social media, where you can get really supportive people of your work, and there's sort of that immediacy of comics where it's like, hey, I have an idea, and you can just sit down and start making it. You don't need producers, you don't need a publisher, if you can write and draw, you're good to go.
Yes. Right. Yeah, man, I'm working on a new Girl Scouts comic book series and having a blast with it, but at this point I thought I was going to do it through Image, and I might still do that, but at this point it's like, well, no one knows what's happening with comics in the direct market, so this might be something I just crowdfund like early next year when it's all done. Or
awesome.
I don't know. The sky's the limit sort of thing, but it's also like figuring. I want to do the art and concentrate on that and make a cool thing, and then I know I have options later to figure out the best strategy for getting the art into people's hands.
Yeah. Well, and you have a very loyal audience, which is awesome. Obviously, you worked very hard to build that, but it's pretty great that you're able to take those, that approach with what you want to do with it, and it's exciting because do you just do it as one book, or did you do it as single issues? That kind of thing. My inclination these days is to just do books instead of breaking them up into miniseries.
Yeah, I think we are going to see the death of the floppy soonish.
Yeah, and I know publishers were really using those as a means to sort of pay for what eventually, if they were paying out any kind of page rates or whatever. But yeah, I think you just start seeing it more and more. People will read the first issue of something, they dig it, they're like, great, I'll just buy the trade.
Right.
Inevitable trade.
Well, floppies have just become so expensive. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, $4 a pop You know.
I know, it's ridiculous. Hey, you guys want to take a quick little break? I can press pause. I just want to get some coffee in me
Sure.
and that sort of thing. Are you finding that there's a level of physical exhaustion setting in from inking, Walt?
No, I'm working on a head now, which is going to take all of my energy and effort. So if you want to take a short break, that's great. I can sort of wrap my head around what this is going to be. So.
All right, so I'm going to press pause, which I can do. I figured that out. All right, welcome back. We took our little break, and now we're ready to get back to it. Troy, you had something to talk about?
Yeah. I just want to say we did some calisthenics and stretches, and now we can power through till the end. But I was just wondering, what was your guys' first Walt Simonson? Like, what was the thing that you saw first of his?
Well, mine, like I said earlier, was that X Factor thing.
Oh, yes. Did we talk about this already? Did I already ask that question?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, you're good. His run on the Fantastic Four in the 80s, like that legendary run, I was seeing that stuff when it was coming out. My buddy I mentioned who collected comics with me, he was buying those, so I was able to read what he was buying, and he read what I was buying, because when you're a kid and you have an allowance, it's like I couldn't afford to buy everything, even though when I started collecting, comics were still 60 cents.
Yeah.
And they bounced up to 75, and they went to $1.
That's when I started, 75 and $1, yeah.
So man, we were limited, but we just did the thing where we would just trade each other's books. But I was reading the Walt 80s run of Fantastic Four, not knowing that he was referencing Kirby and all that kind of stuff, because I didn't know my comics history really at that time.
Well, and it's funny because when you're a kid, you're definitely just whatever appeals to you visually. Like context is irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I found comic shops a little later. I didn't know they existed. I grew up in small town Alberta, and like I said, my first comics were Tintin, Asterix, and Mad Magazine. So when I found comics of Comic Shop, I was just absolutely blown away. It was, to me, it was like Mecca. I was like, oh my God, such a thing exists. This is amazing.
Yeah. How did you get Asterix?
In the library, in the local library.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. And so my mom was a big supporter of us reading. We all read really early, and part of that was she would take us to the library every week, and I could always take out one Tintin or one Asterix, but I also had to take out like one sort of novel or something else. I couldn't just take the comics out of the library.
Right.
But I think my first Simonson, though, when I found the comic store, I believe, was that Manhunter collection.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That blew me away. I just thought was incredible. For one, I was just like, who would want to draw that costume over and over again?
Right. It's crazy that Walt basically has worked on like every title at one point in his career.
Oh yeah.
Thor, all the stuff at Marvel, DC. He did his own version of New Gods, right, for a while. The Orion
book, that was
book, and it's like, man, what a career.
He's one of those artists. I just find that he gets more and more interesting as he continues to work.
Yeah. What's his newest stuff?
Ragnarok. Is he still doing that?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know. Is this Elric we're inking?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think so, just because of the markings on the sword.
Yes. Yeah. The runes.
The runes, thank you. Yes, I'm not steeped in Elric lore.
Either am I. I don't know how I knew that, honestly.
Yeah, although I did read that, was it Elric or Corum that Mignola did way back when? He did an Elric book.
Oh,
Huh,
shit, that's right.
Which book did he do?
I think it was called Corum, wasn't it? Corum?
I don't remember this.
Yeah,
I think you're right. I
yeah.
think you're right.
To clear the dust of the cobwebs out of my memory to remember to pull that one out, but
We should have done more research in advance, but
You guys have exposed me to all these Mignola books that I've never even seen, and I thought I like knew his whole library intimately.
well, you must have the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser book, though.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's
That's
and
some.
Iron Wolf and Cosmic Odyssey are my favorites.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff.
I'm a huge fan of the Alien Salvation one shot. That's
That
great.
Kevin Nolan inked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that Jenny Finn book that he wrote.
Yes. You can shamelessly plug your
Well,
own stuff.
mean, Troy, honestly, like my first exposure to you was the gaming stuff, and then that Jenny Finn stuff, and I was blown away with what you were doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was really weird because Mike still is, for me, my favorite creator working now, like my favorite live creator. I keep telling him after Jack Davis passed away, I was just like, Mike, you just need to keep taking vitamins, Mike.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And good thing, I mean, he's not very old. He's not that much older than I am. But Mike was always, I just gravitated towards his work, especially when Hellboy came out. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
This is a book for me. And when I met him, and because I remember it was at a show or something in Portland. That's back when I lived in Vancouver, so I was coming down to Portland semi-regularly. And I remember being introduced to him and being a little intimidated because at the idea of it, just because, you know, he's your hero and everything. And I remember Bob introduced us, and he just turned to the side and he's like, "Ooh, I like what you do." And he could have, you know, bowled me over with a feather at that. And then just having the balls at that time just to go, well, then we should work together.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then that's sort of how Jenny Finn came about. And this is a very cool Mike story. So when I was visiting, I'd go and see him at his loft when they were living in Portland, and that was pretty close to Powell's. And it was in the very early days of Jenny Finn. We were sort of talking about everything, and we knew it wanted to be Victorian. And so he said, well, let's go to Powell's. We'll get some reference books. That was sort of before, you know, the power of Google. But so we go, and on the way back from Powell's, so this is way, way back in the 90s, he tells me the entire Hellboy arc.
Whoa.
He tells me, you know, that, yeah, he had it dialed in from the very beginning in terms of where he you know, the big broad strokes anyways. He knew he wanted to take him to Africa. He knew he wanted to end up taking him in hell. He's like, yeah, it ends with Hellboy going to hell.
He knew about Africa that early? Wow.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. And
That's
it was
awesome.
just this short conversation on the walk back to his house, and it was just mind-blowing, for one, because I'm just sitting here going, oh my god, here's my favorite creator talking about my favorite comic, and, you know, spilling the beans like this. But also from a creative standpoint, it's like, he just knows all this already. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I think, Troy, was it at San Diego 98 or 99 when you guys actually announced Jenny Finn? Was that?
Yeah, it probably would have been 98 because it came out in 99.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's funny because I'm still very fond of it, but I have some sort of mixed emotions with the book because I didn't finish it. You know, Farrell came on and kicked ass with the 4th issue and saved my bacon, thankfully.
Right.
But it just happened, and so it fell apart at Oni for a myriad of reasons. Don't really need to get into it. Don't need to throw anyone under the bus, but it didn't finish there, and it lingered for a while. And so Ross Ritchie over at Boom approached us to finish it, and I agreed. And this isn't an excuse, it's just sort of how things were. I was in a really, really bad place at that time, and just financially and emotionally, just for, with the relationship that had ended. And I should have said no, that I just was not in a place, but I needed the work. And so I said yes. And I got the 3rd issue done, and that was the hardest thing I ever did, was get that 3rd issue completed. And I already had about 10 pages originally drawn. So I was going in years after the fact to ink that, and then create like another 10 to wrap it up.
Right.
And it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. And so I just couldn't do it, couldn't finish it. And so they found Farrell. And like I said, I think Farrell did an amazing job.
Yeah.
And, but I still look back at that project with Mike and working with Mike, and he's such a wonderful collaborator. He's really great to work with. He definitely is a best idea wins kind of guy. It doesn't always have to be him.
Sure.
So that was really cool. And I'd love to do something with him now. I don't know if it'll happen. I don't know how much writing he's doing for other people right now, but I feel like after all these decades of making comics, I finally feel at a place where my storytelling and everything it's in a much stronger place. And so it'd be really cool to see what we came up with now.
Oh, that'd be amazing, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, if you're watching this.
Yeah. Oh, he knows. I've already brought it up to him.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah. Because I email him and everything, and it's good. And it's I send him art and stuff that I'm working on. And so we chat every once in a while.
What did he say?
I said no. In his usual Mike style, he's just like, no, I'm busy and I got some other commitments and that kind of thing. But I love how he's just so to the point. Like you just appreciate his candor sometimes, right? It's just like, well, no pussyfooting around there.
Yeah, I'd much prefer that than someone who's full of shit who you feel like you can't trust.
Is Mike originally an East Coast guy? I know he lived in the Bay Area forever, and now
I think he's from the Bay Area.
Okay.
I believe that's where he grew up.
Okay, definitely seems like an East Coaster though.
Yeah, I know that he met Christine, I believe, in New York. I think that they lived there for a really long time because she was in the fashion industry forever. So.
Oh shit! Okay.
Yeah, and she's awesome too. Like she is such a great person as well.
Yeah, I only met her like once. This gallery in LA, Hero Complex Gallery, had a huge Hellboy themed art show, like for the anniversary, 20th anniversary, I believe. And like Mike and her were there, and it's a really amazing night, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's that was the one that was not that long ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that I always am surprised that when I get to talk to him, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually getting to have a conversation with him. Like he's taking the time, and we're doing this. We're having an exchange. Like this is awesome.
I've never had that.
He's one thing that I really admire about him is he doesn't sort of really put himself on a pedestal in terms of the pursuit of art and creating art. He loves art. Like he loves art, and he doesn't care who produces it. If he's good, he's very enthusiastic about his praise. And so I've seen it where he's been just gushing to a young artist, and they're sitting there with their mouths hanging open because here you have Mike Mignola telling them how awesome he thinks their work is.
Right.
And it's just great because it's just how it should be, right? I mean, there certainly are some artists who are far too cool for school,
Right.
who would never show that sort of energy and enthusiasm for someone who they may deem in a less, you know, in a lower position than they are.
Right. Right.
But Mike is just like, you're great, you're awesome, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love everyone's voice of Mike is the same.
Yeah.
It's time to break out the toothbrush and get some.
You getting fancy, Jim?
I'm gonna do a little minor spattering, It totally works with this style, with this, you know.
Yeah, I
this
think
look.
anything you can do that's energetic is going to work with Walter.
Sean, what's the thing looking back now, because you've been at this for a while, what's the thing looking back now that you still hold with a lot of fondness?
Like a job I did?
Yeah.
That Batman Arkham Matter was probably the most fun I've had drawing comics, and in terms of work for hire, because I honestly the last few years of work for hire I did, it just wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah.
I did an issue of Scarlet Witch, which I had a blast on, partly because James Robinson's script was really a fun little story, but it was also like the way he wrote the script, it was full of visual information. Like the script I remember was like a document that was 50 something pages long.
Oh my
It
goodness.
wasn't filled with words. It was filled with like images of Salvador Dali and all these surrealist painters and gory and some old comics, and like the whole script was just steeped in like psychedelic imagery and an obvious understanding and appreciation he had for medium. So that was really fun. And I think one of the reasons I haven't had a lot of fun in comics is, I feel like I've got a decent grasp on the medium and how it works. And I have found that my job as a freelancer had turned into like a fix-it man, like fix these scripts because they don't work.
Yeah.
And I wasn't enjoying that. It was like, I want to be a storyteller. There was no room or time for me to come in and like be the storyteller. It was like, just make this clear, make it work. And I feel like that's what a lot of work for hire comics has turned into, because writers just don't know the medium.
Well, that is a huge thing. Obviously, you see publishers trying to expand their audience by bringing in, you know, authors from different genres or whatever, hoping that they'll bring their fans over with them, which, you know, almost never happens. But
Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating because comics is such a specific thing, and no, not everyone can make comics. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound harsh or anything, but it's a skill. Like anything else, and you can do it, you can work at it. Some people kind of take to it naturally, some don't, but just thinking that you can plug a writer into a comic and it works is just completely misguided, in my opinion.
I agree, and they put all the onus on the artist, and these writers, like, they just keep getting promoted while the artist who tried to make it work is kind of left holding the bag for shit that didn't work.
Well, and like, when Vertigo announced what they were doing, like I said, I don't want to talk out of school, but it just felt so desperate when they were bringing in all these non-comic people to create this line of comics, and you just question what the motivation was with it. It didn't make any sense, and it didn't surprise me at all that it didn't last very long.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they also, the companies like Marvel and DC, they put all their stock in the writers.
Yeah.
And it's like I hear about these like Marvel hires these artists and develops them, and then they're like, all right, now you get to come to Marvel training school. But like how I was talking to Howard Chaykin about this once, because he teaches at that, and he's like, I told Marvel they really need to be teaching the writers, and they just don't.
Well, and it's in that they exactly do, and it's, gets back to our last point about you can't just plug someone in and who's a writer and they understand how comics work.
Right.
And it just is. I understand the idea of why they promote writers, because
Sure.
obviously a writer can write 3 or 4 comics a month. Some write 6, and so what better way to do easy promotion than push a writer who's creating 6 books than an artist who's only working on 1.
Right. But I think ultimately it's like a cancer, because you don't put
100%.
books. I mean, the books end up not being great. The sales end up not being great, and it's
I mean, I understand it. I don't agree with it.
Right.
And it's funny because I saw a clip, and it was from a convention, and it was an animation writer that came over, and they asked him, and I don't know his name. I'm not purposefully forgetting. I can't remember his name. And they asked him his role as a writer in comics, and he believed that he, as a writer in comics, was more like a director in film.
Right, which is.
And I almost fell out of my chair. It was the most ludicrous thing I'd ever heard in my life.
This mindset is nurtured by the publishers. I remember I was doing a book at Marvel. I got pages and pages of notes on my thumbnails from the writer.
Oh, God.
And the editor said nothing. And the writer didn't know what the fuck he was doing, because I had to spend so much time like choreographing this scene that made no sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, and nobody stood up and said like, hey buddy, Sean's got this.
Yeah. Sean knows what's up. It's all good.
Yeah, so that's when it all kind of started to turn for me. I was like, I am not enjoying this at all.
Well, have you written your own work, Sean? Excuse my ignorance.
No. I mean, no one would know. My very first, my second published job was a short story I wrote and drew for Heavy Metal. I mean, I wrote and drew it. I got into this wanting to write my own stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember growing up, I paid close attention to Frank Miller because I loved his books. And I was like, that's the model. You go and draw comics for Marvel or DC, you get a name, and then you can go write and draw your own shit at another company. And of course, times are very different now, but that was the model I was following coming in. So after I did my first work for hire job at DC, I was like, I wasn't getting work for a while. So I was like, let me just write and draw my own little short and see if that will get me more freelance work. And ultimately, it got me that story published. Kevin Eastman loved it and published it. But that was the only thing I've ever published writing, and I do want to get back to it. I mean, that's what I mean when I say I'm trying to build revenue streams that will allow me to do that.
Yeah, and I do think that that's sort of the way that comics are going to go in the future, that it'll either be creators writing and drawing their own books, or it'll be like a tight team, something like what Darcy and Ian did, for instance, with Little Bird.
Love that book.
Yeah.
Love that book.
it just won't be this sort of work for hire mentality. It'll be very tight collaborations, or writer artists doing their own stuff, and which I'm happy about. I think it'll be sort of more of the European model than what's popular now. And I don't read Marvel and DC books. I haven't for a long time, and you just sort of see them now as really it's more about creating a product than the books that we read when we were younger.
Right. It feels like fan fiction now. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. Like where's the Frank Miller, the new Frank Miller is doing Daredevil or doing Batman Year One,
Where's the great comic that will stand the test of time that they've put out that is exciting to read and challenging the medium?
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that it's not really happening.
Yeah, well, it's not going to happen through Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
Those are like corporate movie studio comics now, basically.
Yeah.
So
we did grow up with them doing that. Is why I think we're kind of thinking that way.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't mean that the next Year One or the next Dark Knight can't come from like the indie underground.
Oh, and it does. Yeah, that's what I should have clarified. I 100% believe that it is. I believe that the best comic creators, oh God, I'm going to get shit for this one, aren't working at Marvel and DC per se. I think that, or they come back and forth, like they'll go do an image book and then they'll go do kind of a cool special project or Marvel at DC,
Right. You can say that, man, because it's true. Like I 100% agree with that, and I think one exciting thing that's happening in comics now is it does seem to be this new movement of pure creators that can write and draw and create their own stuff.
Yeah.
Doing their own books and doing everything, writing, drawing, lettering, literally everything.
Yeah.
And that to me is like an exciting movement. It's a strange and bizarre coincidence that as that's happening, it almost seems like the direct market is obviously crumbling apart. And so, the era of like the superstar writer who gets his name on top of the book before the artist at Marvel and DC, that era ending doesn't make me sad.
No, I agree.
So what gets me excited is knowing that there's creators out there, old and new, that are just saying, fuck it, I've got my own thing that I want to write and draw. I'm going to make it and put it out there.
Yeah.
And now because of the internet and social media, you can really do something.
Yeah.
And hit your audience.
Well, and I think that it's just an adaptation of distribution that has to happen. I mean, with what happened with Dynamite, it was Dynamite, it just blew up. What happened with Diamond was everyone sort of suspected just how that it was walking on thin ice, but I don't think anyone knew how thin it was, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, yeah, don't send us your comics. Oh, and by the way, we're not paying you. We don't have the money to pay you, publishers. Sorry. And that's what happens when you have a monopoly. There's no checks and balances. And it's just so unhealthy.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for the creators to step up and kind of take control.
Yeah. And I do think there are opportunities for, like, I'm not like, oh no, woe is us. I don't think that's the scenario at all.
I don't either. I it's something that Sean and I have been talking about even before the virus scare, even before it all hit, the idea of like, this current system of how comics are made and distributed is not working out. Like, let's at least get dialogue going of like, what would be other ideas, other avenues, other ways of getting the work out there, and that's where it starts. It starts with people just talking. So
yeah, and I think that there'll be some growing pains with all of it. I do think that that book publishers will probably pick up some of the slack. I think that the digital will come in. I think that, like Sean, as you mentioned, sort of direct marketing to your audience will become an even bigger deal. And yeah, it just means that we have to be smarter about how we go about making money, but we can still make books the same way. I mean,
sure.
The approach to comics is so pure and amazing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an exciting time, not a depressing time.
No.
Yeah, man, I'm feeling good in my studio these days, just doing the work. It's
Me too.
you know, the business application of it all that comes afterwards, that's a whole other thing, but the actual act of making stuff has been great, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like just discovering a webcam and doing these podcasts is brand new because of all this to me. And like what we're doing now is I'm learning, I'm having fun, and we're recording something, and we can actually try to auction these drawings off to help people. Like, there's a lot of cool shit going on right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot of horrible shit too. I'm not trying to diminish that.
No.
I'm just trying to keep my spirits positive and move forward. So I think I'm done with no, not yet. Never mind.
Nope. And grumpily, I was, would sort of complain about the situation of Marvel and DC and comics in North America, and you do see it changing. It's evolving slowly, but where, like we were saying, like the best stuff isn't being done there
right
now. So, but
yeah, I don't even really consider them in the grand scheme of comics as an art form anymore.
No,
yeah,
I don't. Everything we've talked about as far as comics go in this show of stuff we liked is shit that if they were from Marvel and DC, it was shit from like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, you notice none of us have been like, did you see last year's Marvel series of such and such? That it was like. Besides the Silver Surfer book that Trad Moore drew last year, I don't own any Marvel comics from like the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm not here to like shit on them, but I'm
right.
they're not even really in my comics wheelhouse of vocabulary of what I'm referring to.
For me, I really did enjoy that Raphael Grampa stuff on that Dark Knight book. Like that was beautiful artwork.
But that's just a one shot, dude. I mean, the fact that they put out one single issue of good stuff, like that's not enough.
No, that's shitty.
That's not a good sign.
Yeah, that stuff that Trad did, and I did buy that Silver Surfer book just for what Trad and Dave did on that. That was mind blowing. Like that was Trad.
It's incredible. Yeah,
Trad pushing the boundaries of not only what people expect of traditional comics, and by that I mean Marvel and DC, but just comics in general. Like that guy is on that. I don't know Trad at all, so
I don't either.
Like I'm subtly pushing a buddy of mine. I don't know him. He could walk down the street. I wouldn't know it was him, but like that guy is just exceptional. He's just absolutely exceptional.
It's a book that I was like, this is shocking that this is coming out through Marvel.
Yeah, right.
This is I was in LA when one of the issues came out, and I had to show it to Huddleston, and he like stopped drawing and was like, what is this? Like this exists? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's incredible.
Mike's book is something I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Do you guys own the first issue yet? Have you seen it?
No. I haven't been to a comic shop.
Shit. Okay, it's fantastic. It's so good. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's like my closest friend basically, so I'm gonna hype him up, but the work he's doing on it is just talk about out of this world. It's Really, really good stuff, man.
I remember meeting Mike for the first time, and you introduced us, and he showed me. This was before the coffin happened by a bit, and he showed me his work, and he's like, "Yeah," and he was sort of sheepish to show me, which is ridiculous. And he showed me his work, and it was amazing. And he just was, because I mean, he's not a guy to pat himself on the back at all. And
Right.
so I was like, man, this work is amazing. And he's just like, he was kind of like, oh, thanks. It was really funny. And it was at that point where it's like, I'm going to be friends with this dude.
Oh, definitely. It was funny, man, because I got discovered basically in San Diego in '97, like I was saying, and got the Clerks gig from that. So all my friends in Kansas City, Mike Huddleston, his girlfriend Kelly Sita at the time, our buddy Steve Willarette, they all went to San Diego the next year in '98 with their portfolios filled with new work and samples, because they were like, okay, if Mahfood can go out to San Diego in '97 and get like discovered by like Shrek and Kevin Smith and his fucking career is blowing up, San Diego is the place to go. And they all went out there and shopped their stuff around and all wound up getting some freelance shit happening, across the board. So that was the era, man, where like, San Diego was my jam, obviously. So, and I would see you guys hang out. We all became super tight with Scott Morse.
Yeah.
Him and I started exhibiting together in San Diego, and it was just a party, man, before like Hollywood came in and took it over. But
yeah, it was big at that time, but not unmanageable.
Right.
And now it's just ridiculous. I don't know how anyone manages with that now. It's just so bizarre to me. But
yeah, well, I mean, the last time I was there was like 3 years ago, and one good sign was I was sort of noticing that like the Hollywood stuff is starting to get toned down a little bit.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because think about it, man. Like Marvel and DC don't really need to spend millions of dollars there advertising the movies anymore, because everyone's going to go see those movies anyway.
Yeah.
Like they've got the audience. They've got you hooked. If you're a Marvel movie fan, you're going to see every flick when it comes out. So I sort of noticed that the annoying overabundance of all that shit was sort of starting to scale down a little bit.
Yeah.
So, what I'm trying to say, Troy, is maybe in like 5 years we can all go back and start exhibiting there again, and
that'd be awesome.
We'll see. I have no idea how much booth space is there or whatever, but last time I talked to Scott Morse a couple months ago, it was something we were talking about, like, okay, at some point we need to like go back and just see what would happen.
Yeah. Well, because you guys had that whole awesome, what was it called again, Jim? The con across the street that pissed everybody off.
Oh, Trickster.
Trickster, yeah. That was amazing.
You got to admit, that's still one of the most punk things that's ever happened.
Tim, were you involved in the creation of that?
No, it was Scott Morse and his buddy Ted, these two guys from Pixar that were the geniuses behind it. But I mean, I was in at the ground level of the first year of like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have live art there, we're gonna reach out to all the creators we know, we're gonna have exclusive product available there. But I mean, it was Scott and Ted who like raised the money and got the space, and it was incredible, dude. That first year was amazing. I mean, speaking of Mignola, like one of the things that made San Diego shit their pants was we got Mignola to leave the Comic-Con and join us.
Yeah.
So San Diego was like, oh shit, these kids are getting like OG legendary comic book artists to leave their tables and join this new thing. So needless to say, they Comic-Con was not happy with us, but
Oh, fuck them.
the first year, man, first year was awesome. It was great.
It's cool. I remember I was there that year because I came down, I think for movie stuff at that point. What year was Trickster?
The first year was 2010, I think.
Yeah, so I would have come down for movie related business.
Yeah.
And because I was only there for I think a day or two, I wasn't there for the whole thing. So, but I hadn't seen you guys in so long, so it was awesome to come and hang out for a little bit, anyways. But yeah, you guys were doing. I think when I came in, you were doing like live art and all that stuff, like live models and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's just like, oh, this is how it should be.
Yeah, it was crazy, dude. Scott Morse got like Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine to perform at night.
What?
Like his band, and it was Guillermo del Toro showed up and did like a daytime lecture. You know?
Yeah, that's why I was there. Was Guillermo stuff. So
yes. So it was it was a defiant middle finger in the air to what San Diego had sort of become and how they had kind of pushed all the visual artists to the side.
Yeah, well, and that's why Trickster, was created, because it started as a comic convention that, had forgotten about comics, at least the people that make them.
Right. I think I'm done, guys.
Yeah, so am I. I'm just kind of noodling at this point.
This is
You
fun.
done, Jim?
Yeah.
All right, talk, Jim, so I can see it. I'm gonna walk over and check it out.
Yeah. So I think this is done. I've worked it to the point of I was thinking about adding a little yellow into the bat signal in the belt, but maybe not. I might just keep it as the toned paper, the black and white, and
that's amazing, man. I love that.
Yeah. Pretty fun.
It was, yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, Jim, that's rad, dude.
Thanks, man.
Troy, let me see what you got.
Okay. Here we go. Actually, I'm I think it turned out all right.
Oh, nice.
Oh, hell yeah.
That looks great, dude.
I didn't have a circle template big enough, so I made them kind of wavy lines.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You can still see Walt in there, too.
Can you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, on both of you guys, you can see that. Here's let me see if mine's in frame good enough. But yeah, I didn't use a template either, Scott. Troy, I keep calling Scott.
Nice. I like that. I dig that. It's I like how you went in with the really solid blacks in there. That's cool.
Sean,
yeah, that was something I figured out as I was going. I needed those to like ground the piece a bit.
Nice.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun, guys.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I think we rocked it.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna press stop on the record, but you guys will still be in the room so we can chat a little bit. Thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for participating. We are going to have an auction for those that want to submit their art to raise some money for the medical community during this viral crisis we got going on. But thank you again.